Have you ever been called selfish for protecting the very people who hurt you? If you've ever had to choose between your peace and your family's chaos, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe, because these aren't just stories, they're survival guides. It happened 3 days before Christmas. My dad slammed his fist on the kitchen table so hard that the plates rattled. His voice, sharp and trembling with rage, cut through the air like glass. You either help your sister or get the hell out of this house. It was a family dinner, what was supposed to be one. The roast was still warm, the tree blinking quietly in the corner. My mom stared at her wine glass like it had the answers. My aunt looked down at her plate. No one said a word. Except him. And me. You see, I was the good child. The one with the job. The savings. The one who never asked for anything. My sister? She had a history of blowing through money like it burned her hands. But this time, it wasn't just shopping or credit cards. It was gambling. Big money. Dangerous people. And now they wanted me to fix it. I remember how every eye at the table turned toward me, like I was the villain for not instantly agreeing to bail her out. As if I had created the mess. As if setting boundaries was betrayal. I looked at my father. At his clenched fists. At his disappointment that I wasn't falling in line. That I had grown a spine. And I said nothing. I stood up quietly. My chair scraped the floor like a scream. I walked out. No yelling. No crying. Just silence. But what they didn't know was, I wasn't just walking away from dinner. I was walking away from a lifetime of being the family's safety net. They didn't just want my help. They expected my sacrifice. After that night, I didn't go back. Not for Christmas morning. Not for the calls. Not when my mom left me 5 voicemails with that brittle, shaking voice she uses whenever she wants to guilt me into something. I didn't even respond to the group text from my cousin asking what happened, because honestly, I didn't know how to explain it in a sentence that didn't make me sound cold or heartless. But maybe I had finally reached my limit. Maybe being the responsible one didn't mean I had to be the family's doormat. The days after that dinner were strangely quiet. Too quiet. I was used to constant family noise, calls from my sister at odd hours, messages from my dad reminding me about errands, unexpected requests that somehow became my duty. But now, silence. And for the first time in years I felt still. It was like my body didn't know what to do without the weight of everyone else's chaos pressing down on it. But that stillness didn't last. It started with email. From my mom. Just a simple line. Call me. It's serious. And I knew exactly what it was about. I called her that evening. Her voice was tight, measured, like she was holding something back, or like she was reading from a script. Your sister's in trouble, she said. She borrowed money from the wrong people. She thought she could win it back before they noticed, but well, she didn't. I didn't say anything. I could hear her breathing, waiting for me to respond. She could get hurt, she added. They said they'd give her a week. Ethan, please. Just talk to your father. I almost laughed. Talk to him? The man who lunged at me in front of the entire family because I dared to say no? The man who looked at me like I was a stranger, like he hadn't raised me, fed me, taken me to school every day when I was a kid? Instead, I just said, I'm sorry, and hung up. That was the first real crack. The second came 3 days later when my boss called me into her office. Now I work in finance. That week had been brutal, and I was buried in reports. I thought maybe I missed a deadline or forgot something minor. But the look on her face, tight-lipped, eyes filled with concern, told me this wasn't about work. There's a man, she said carefully, who's been calling our office. Repeatedly. Says he's your father. He left some unsettling messages with our receptionist. Accused you of abandoning family, said you had a moral obligation to help your sister. My blood ran cold. I couldn't speak. Not right away. I'm not here to judge, she added quickly. But you need to handle this. Professionally and personally. We can't have family disputes bleeding into the workplace. I apologized. Profusely. Then walked out of her office with my heart pounding in my ears. That night, I blocked my father's number. And then I blocked my mother's. And my sister's. Because what other choice did I have? It wasn't just a boundary anymore, it was self-defense. But the third crack came when the hospital called. Yes, the hospital. because my sister had taken a beating from the men she owed money to. She was found in a parking lot, bruised, half-conscious, with no ID and a phone that was smashed to bits. And someone, maybe a nurse, maybe my mom, put me down as her emergency contact. I went. Of course I did. I'm not a monster. But I didn't cry when I saw her. I didn't sit by her side and hold her hand. I stood at the foot of the bed, staring at the bandages and the bruises, feeling absolutely numb. My mother was there too. Eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears. When she saw me, she whispered, "Thank God." I nodded. But I didn't say anything. Not until my father walked in. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud. He didn't even look at my sister. Just marched straight up to me and said, loud and clear, "This is what happens when family doesn't stick together." That was it. That was the moment something inside me broke clean in half. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "No. This is what happens when you enable someone for too long. When you punish the people who set boundaries instead of the ones who cross them." He opened his mouth, probably to yell, to argue, to swing if we hadn't been in a hospital, but I walked out. I didn't look back. That was the night I decided I was done. Done being the fixer, the safety net, the bank account, the scapegoat. I went home, poured myself a drink, and wrote down everything I could remember, every loan I paid off, every time I bailed my sister out, every phone call, every text, every demand. I made a file. I kept receipts. Because deep down, I knew they weren't finished. They wouldn't just let me go. They'd try something else. And when they did, I would be ready. They didn't stop. Blocking their numbers only paused the chaos for a few days. Then came the emails. Long, emotional monologues from my mom. Short, angry messages from my dad. And when those didn't get responses, the messages turned manipulative. Screenshots of my sister in the hospital, old family photos, even a video clip of her crying and saying she didn't mean for things to go this far. But the tipping point wasn't the guilt tripping. It was the lawsuit. Yes. A lawsuit. They sued me. My father claimed that I had promised financial assistance, and that I had intentionally withdrawn it, leading to my sister's injuries. The documents were delivered to my apartment by a man who didn't need my eye. Just handed over the envelope and walked away like he'd been doing this for years. I sat on my couch for a long time, just staring at the stack of legal pages in disbelief. And then, something in me clicked. This was no longer about money. This was about control. They couldn't yell at me anymore, so they were trying to punish me on paper. In public. Legally. They wanted me to be afraid. To bend. To crawl back and beg for forgiveness. But what they didn't know was, I'd been preparing. I didn't just make mental notes of everything they said. I'd been documenting, quietly and thoroughly, for months, maybe even years. Every request. Every Venmo transfer. Every email that mentioned repayment. Every bank withdrawal I'd made under pressure. I even had a spreadsheet. Color-coded. Dated. Organized. And the most important part? I had boundaries in writing. I had messages from my sister saying, "I know you said you can't help me anymore, but please." Or, "You already said no, but I thought I'd ask one last time." I hired a lawyer the next morning. He read through everything. Then looked at me and said, "This is one of the clearest examples of family coercion I've ever seen. You've done 90% of the work already. We're going to dismantle this." And we did. We didn't just respond to the lawsuit, we countered. We filed a motion to dismiss, attached with all the evidence I had gathered. We also submitted a harassment complaint, complete with voicemail transcriptions and witness statements from coworkers who had overheard my father's calls. But I wasn't done yet. I knew my father wouldn't back off until he was embarrassed. Publicly. Legally. Permanently. So I took it a step further. I filed a petition to have myself removed from any future financial responsibility tied to my sister's debts. I included psychiatric reports that detailed the years of emotional strain, documented therapy sessions where I discussed the impact of being the family ATM, and submitted a full financial breakdown that showed how their demands had jeopardized my own credit score and retirement savings. It was a process. Court dates. Paperwork. Statements. But I showed up to every hearing. Clean cut. Calm. With folders. My father didn't. He missed the first hearing, then showed up to the second one looking disheveled and angry, muttering about family betrayal and ungrateful children. My mother cried in the hallway, but didn't enter the courtroom. My sister? She was there. She avoided eye contact the whole time. Wore sunglasses indoors. Brought a man with her, probably a boyfriend, maybe someone else caught in her mess. The judge didn't even take long to decide. Everything was dismissed. But more than that, the court issued a formal statement declaring I held no financial or moral obligation to support my sister or my parents. It wasn't just a legal win. It was a declaration. On paper. From the state. And that's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I told my story. Anonymously, of course. I posted online, not on some petty rant forum, but a financial subreddit. I laid out the entire saga. From the family dinners to the threats. From the hospital calls to the lawsuit. I included screenshots with redacted names, dates, patterns, receipts. And the post exploded. Thousands of comments. People thanking me for speaking up. Sharing their own stories. Asking for advice. Calling my parents toxic. Encouraging me. But the real twist? Someone on that thread turned out to be a journalist. A freelance writer who reached out, again anonymously, and said they were doing a piece on adult children breaking free from financial abuse. They wanted to feature my case. I said yes. The article went viral. Of course, my name wasn't in it. But anyone who knew the story, anyone in my family, would recognize the details. The lawsuit. The threats. The hospital. It was unmistakable. And just like that, the power shifted. I didn't respond to my father's last attempt to reach me, which came in the form of a typed letter, mailed to my work, sealed with his initials. I didn't even open it. I gave it to my lawyer. My sister hasn't contacted me since the court date. I heard she moved out of state. I hope she's okay. I hope she's learning something. But I'm no longer her cushion to fall on. And my mother? She sent me one last message. I don't recognize you anymore. She meant it as a curse. But I took it as a blessing. Because she was right. I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the boy who said yes to every request, who paid everyone's bills, who kept peace at the expense of his own sanity. I wasn't the shield, the fixer, the silent one. I was something else now. I was free. It's been 11 months since the last letter from my father. I still have it. Unopened. Folded and tucked away in a drawer I almost never touch. Not because I'm holding onto it for sentimental reasons, but because it's a reminder. A monument to what used to be. A relic of a life I no longer live. In that time, I've rebuilt things I didn't even know were broken. I changed apartments. The old one felt haunted, not with ghosts but with pressure. With memories of nights spent calculating how much I could afford to give without going under myself. With echoes of ringing phones, of guilt wrapped in parental disappointment. So I moved. Nothing fancy. Just quieter. Lighter. Like my lungs could finally expand. I started therapy again. Not for emergencies this time. Not for damage control. But to process. To actually heal. To unlearn years of reflexive people-pleasing and hyper-responsibility. My therapist told me something I'll never forget. You can love someone and still choose yourself. That isn't betrayal. That's survival. I repeated that line to myself every morning for weeks. Work improved, too. My boss, who had once quietly questioned whether I could draw boundaries, told me she was proud. Not because I had fought back, but because I had done it with grace, with documentation, with logic instead of vengeance. My reputation at the firm, oddly enough, soared. I got more clients. Bigger responsibilities. Promotions. Apparently, being the person who can stand up to their own family shows people you can handle almost anything. But the real change, the one I didn't expect, came from the people I didn't even know. Strangers. Ever since the article went live, people have found me. Not in person. Not directly. But through threads. Through anonymous messages. They didn't know who I was, but they knew what I had done. Some shared their own horror stories. Parents stealing their credit. Siblings using their names for loans, constant emotional blackmail disguised as family obligation. Others simply said, "Thank you. I thought I was alone." And then one day, something surprising happened. I got invited to speak. Not on a stage, not in some dramatic TED Talk setting, but to a small, private support group for adults disentangling from toxic families. They wanted to hear how I had navigated the storm, what steps I took, how I knew when it was time to walk away. I agreed. At first, I was nervous. My hands shook. I wasn't used to talking out loud about something that had, for so long, lived in the dark corners of my private world. But as I began to speak, detailing the dinner, the hospital, the lawsuit, the courtroom, I watched the room lean in. People nodded. People cried. Some laughed bitterly at how familiar it all sounded. It felt like exhaling. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and only just realized it. And afterward, someone came up to me, an older woman, maybe late 50s, silver hair tied in a bun, and she said, "Your story gave me permission to walk away from my brother. I don't think I could have done it without hearing you." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. That was the night I stopped feeling ashamed. You see, shame was the last chain I hadn't broken. It's sneaky. It creeps in when you finally get peace and whispers, "You didn't earn this. You should have stayed. You should have given more." It sounds like your mother's voice, your father's, your sister's. But now I know better. I didn't betray anyone. They betrayed the part of me that tried, desperately, to hold everything together. And speaking of my sister, she messaged me a month ago. No fake name. No burner account. Just her, from a new number. She wrote, "I know you probably hate me. I'm in a different place now. I've been in recovery for 6 months. I wanted to say thank you for walking away. Because when you did, I had no one left to lean on but myself. And weirdly, that saved me." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I wrote back, "I don't hate you, but I can't be part of your story anymore. I hope you keep healing." And I meant it. I didn't feel angry or sad. Just done. Cleanly. Finally. She didn't reply. And that was okay. Not everything needs a tidy bow. Sometimes, the win is just the silence. The peace. The absence of crisis. Now, my life is quieter. My phone doesn't buzz at midnight. My mailbox doesn't contain legal threats. Holidays are spent with friends, with chosen family, with people who ask, not expect. Who give, not guilt. I'm still cautious. Boundaries don't erase years of habit overnight. I still flinch when people say, "Can you help me with something?" But I pause, breathe, and ask, "Is this mine to carry?" And if it's not, I put it down. Because I've carried enough. And when I think about that night, my father lunging at me, my sister's black eye, my mother's shaking voice, I don't feel trapped anymore. I feel powerful. Not because I hurt them, but because I didn't let them keep hurting me. So if you're listening, if you've been called ungrateful for choosing peace, selfish for choosing distance, let me tell you something. You are not wrong. You are not cruel. You are not alone. And maybe, just maybe, walking away isn't the end of the story. Maybe, it's the beginning. People often think that the hardest part of walking away is the act itself. The moment your feet turn, the door closes, the phone call ends. But that's not true. The hardest part is believing that you have the right to walk away in the first place. I spent most of my life thinking that love meant sacrifice. That being a good son meant being available, helpful, willing to drop everything and rush to fix whatever mess someone else made. I thought that boundaries were selfish. That saying no was cold. That being tired was weakness. But what I've learned, what life, and pain, and clarity have taught me, is this. You can love people and still say no. You can care deeply and still protect yourself. You can be a good person, without being someone's emotional punching bag or financial backup plan. My biggest mistake wasn't refusing to help my sister pay off her gambling debt. It was helping her too many times before that. It was staying silent when I should have drawn a line. It was letting guilt dictate my choices instead of reason. Instead of self-respect. Because here's the truth they don't tell you about family. Loyalty without boundaries becomes bondage. And when a family member weaponizes your loyalty, when they guilt you, sue you, shame you for stepping away from dysfunction, that's no longer love. That's control. I've learned that real love is not loud or demanding. It doesn't twist your arm or raise its voice. It doesn't tell you that you're ungrateful when you choose mental health over obligation. Real love says, "I see you. I understand. And I want you to be okay, even if it means I don't get what I want. I didn't grow up with that kind of love. But I've started to build it for myself. With people who respect my no's as much as my yes. With friends who ask instead of assume. With a therapist who reminds me that boundaries are not walls, they're doors with locks, and I get to choose who enters. I've also learned to forgive myself. Forgive the version of me who tried too hard. Who gave too much. Who bent until he broke. Because that version was just trying to survive. He was doing his best with what he knew. And now, I know better. And knowing better has changed everything. It's changed how I show up at work. How I date. How I spend holidays. How I handle pressure. How I speak to myself. It's even changed how I define success. It's no longer about money or promotions or being seen as the stable one in a broken family. It's about peace. Sleep. A quiet Sunday morning with coffee and no buzzing phone full of panic. That to me is wealth. That to me is freedom. So if you're someone who feels torn between your needs and your family's demands, please hear this. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to outgrow people, even if you share blood. And if they punish you for choosing yourself, let them. Because the ones worth keeping will never ask you to burn yourself to keep them warm. They'll bring their own fire. Or sit with you in the dark until the light returns. That's what I've learned. That's the life I'm building now. And it's quieter. But it's mine.